Hello people, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. Here's why stablecoins cannot make XRP obsolete in cross-border payments. Okay guys, let's get into it. Okay, so I thought I'd cover this because, as you guys know, I've been covering some things about, for example, the Solana and Western Union partnership and, where I've been seeing how banks are going, and it does seem like they've been looking to go more towards stablecoins when it's coming to cross-border payments. And so, I have been saying that, XRP's role as a bridge asset doesn't seem as strong as what it once was. And so I have been questioning myself a bit lately in regards to seeing where does XRP's position come in then with this, and question more things and just trying to figure out in my head where I think this is all going. And so I thought I'd cover this because this is helping me to flesh out my thoughts some more, but it tells you the reason as to why I still believe XRP has a role within the cross-border payment sector. I do believe that, and I do just want to be clear when I say this anyway. If, let's just say, the worst case scenario was to happen and XRP as a bridge currency was to, not to say it would fail, but it becomes very minimal in terms of its use case. I've said it before, and I've said this months ago anyway. XRP can do more things than just cross-border payments. And I've said this before because, when I've talked about banks saying about XRP going to like $10,000 and all the banks using it, like, look past the cross-border payments thing. There's more to XRP than just cross-border payments. And so, for me, it doesn't really matter if this does happen. It is obviously going to affect its utility, of course, but I don't think this would mean it's the end for XRP. But let's put that to the side. So I want to get into this, and I've got some posts here that I want to share. And I think this gives you a great explanation of XRP, its purpose. And again, it'll explain as to why I don't think XRP will become obsolete through stablecoins. Okay, so I'm going to start this off with a post here from Santiago Velez, and this was in regards to a post that someone had put, and I think it was the Wolf of All Streets, yes, and he was basically saying after the whole, Solana and Western Union partnership, he was asking, well, what's XRP's utility then? Because, it doesn't seem like it's being used as a bridge asset. And so we've got here Santiago Velez making a real strong post about XRP. And this, to me, I think if people have done their research and understand XRP, this is where this will explain it for you amazingly. So Santiago Velez, shout out to you. You did this beautifully. It's a really strong post. So let me read this and I'll continue to flesh out my thoughts from there. So Santiago Velez said, one of the purposes of the XRP native asset to the XRPL layer 1 is to have value for spam prevention. In brackets, it's not gas, but it can disincentivize DDoS attacks. The original design of the ledger was to use XRP in the quote rippling unquote process as part of an intercurrency pathfinding exercise. In brackets, the native token is uniquely integral to this function, and it's why the XRPL had the first DEX in crypto. Rippling is the process of exchanging equivalent tokens using the same currency code. In the typical case, rippling through an issuer involves reducing the tokens issued to one party and increasing the tokens issued to another party by an equal amount. The path step specifies which amount to ripple through. In brackets, that's where the name for the company comes from. Ultimately, the role of XRP is to be a neutral bridge currency that has no central issuer, in brackets, e.g., it is not an IOU like a stablecoin and does not carry the inherent counterparty risk that comes with an IOU. XRP as the native asset only carries the market-based volatility risk unique to digital assets, in brackets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, etc. The volatility risk can be addressed via efficient AMMs, low settlement times between rippling, pathfinding, etc. To my knowledge, no other large cap L1 is designed this way with the exception of XLM, in brackets, as a fork of XRP. Okay, yeah, so this is the thing with XRP. XRP was specifically designed for payments, right? That is what makes XRP unique in that regard. So the reason why XRP doesn't have smart contracts, it's not that it's incapable, it's that when they designed the XRP ledger, they was hoping to be dealing with payments of all sorts, right? And so, for example, David Schwartz has spoken about XRP, and when they designed the XRP ledger, their original vision was just to create a better Bitcoin, okay? Now, what is Bitcoin? The original intended purpose of Bitcoin was to be a peer-to-peer payment network. That was the original vision for Bitcoin. It's now obviously being treated as digital gold, a store of value. And the reason why that is because it couldn't work as a peer-to-peer network, right? The gas fees were too high, it was too slow, it couldn't do it. And so David Schwartz and the rest of the guys who created the XRP ledger, they just wanted to create a better version of Bitcoin to be a peer-to-peer payment network. And so that was the hope and the dream. So they wasn't focusing on other things like smart contracts needed and things like that, because their hope was really to just be a payment network. And so XRP is specifically designed for payments. And that's why with the XRP ledger, to my knowledge, just as Santiago said, I could be wrong, but XRP is the best network when it comes to payments because it was designed specifically for payments. That's its special use case. That's what they was really hoping to achieve with the network, to be specifically a payments network. And that was its core focus. And so, to me, this is where straight away, when it comes to wanting to use a network, if you're talking about money, this is what XRP's wheelhouse is. That's what it was designed for. So you're going to get one of the best experiences you can have using XRP because this is what it was made for. And the fact that it's a top 3 cryptocurrency, it's highly liquid. So you've got the best of both worlds there, right? And so this is the other thing where, we're talking about the whole stablecoin thing, right? Like, this is a point that Santiago made. When you've got an IOU, like a stablecoin, because that's what it is, again, you've got the inherent counterparty risk. And this is what I said before. Like, I still find it strange that, countries are going to be willing to just deal with each other's stablecoins. I still find that really hard to comprehend. I will be honest with you. Like, I get that we can still use the stablecoins and, there can be other networks that can do stacking and, there's all these other things. But I still just see XRP as the easy answer because you don't need to have another person's stablecoin. You don't need to deal with another person's stablecoin. So I do just still see XRP being no counterparty at all. It's just a neutral bridge and it will just transfer the other person's currency for them. No manual intervention needed. You don't need to swap. And yes, I get that, in this day and age now with things like crypto, this can be done very fast because obviously if you're doing it on chain, like you're using like tokenized assets and stuff like that, it can be done very quickly. But that's still something that the XRP ledger can do for you. You literally just say, I have this currency, I'm going to transfer it to this country, and XRP will transfer it to that country's currency automatically for you. You haven't got to do anything on the other end. You've just got to send the transfer. That's it. So I still think that is a very strong case for XRP. Now, I want to just move on to the other post that he put. So, Wolf of All Streets replied back saying, thank you for the answer, a really strong point. But he said, what do you think about the usage of it though? Because it doesn't seem like it's really being adopted like that. So, this is what Santiago put in response. I don't think it's being adopted anywhere near the scale that it's being promoted, in brackets, as evidenced by on-chain volumes and data, but more importantly, what it's capable of. I think this is the crux of most investors in XRP. They understand its true potential and assess that its price doesn't match its value. This is my position. There is a deeper truth here to all of crypto. This is proto money, a small story becoming a big one. The vast majority of price appreciation is driven by narrative and the social consensus behind it. Not the tech, not the partnerships, but the promises of what could be. We are watching the internet of value being born in real time, and we are all hoping that our piece of it graduates to its full vision. I personally picked XRP because of this reason, with the understanding that it has the strongest community in crypto. Some of us are actively building the internet of value instead of relying on others to do so. With regards to stablecoins and their growth, I personally believe there is incredible volatility and suffering that is being built. They hide severe hidden risks that people don't appreciate, without any of the assurances of traditional bank deposits, in brackets like FDIC. People don't understand how they can depeg, in brackets see Luna or even Circle during the Silicon Valley Bank fiasco. People don't understand the duration risk of the underlying assets that back stablecoins, in brackets it's not $1 to one stablecoin. They are backed by promises from an issuer, whose value carries hidden market and volatility risks. Finally, and most importantly, stablecoins represent the final death gasp of a dying global hegemony. We are in the late stages of empire cycle that traditionally has meant severe and abrupt currency debasement. The volatility of the purchasing power that comes with this can be both abrupt and shocking. Anyone touting the benefits of stablecoins as being, quote, stable, unquote, doesn't appreciate the seriousness of the situation and is selling something. We are all here in crypto for purchasing power, not stability. Increased use of stablecoins is a good thing for the tech stack, but does little to address our desire for investment, and even less to solve the eventual problem of a world that doesn't suffer from the Triffin's dilemma. Really strong post there. Really strong post, and I'm going to get into the Triffin dilemma just shortly, but I just want to go back to some of the things that he's saying here. And this is why when I was talking about this from before, I just like, this is where I think in regards to what's happening with this, right? They're sticking to stablecoins. To me, it's almost like that they don't want to risk XRP being a global bridge asset because, look, I don't want to get conspiracy theory based here, right? So I'm going to try and keep this as grounded as I can. But I kind of feel like, to a degree, this could be a thing of they just want to stick to the fiat currency like model, and they don't want to risk it being used in any other way. Because, for example, you know, when we look at the whole fiat currency is all based on trust. Right? Like, at the end of the day, if people was to turn around tomorrow and say, we do not feel like this piece of paper that we have that is called a note, a dollar note or whatever, or any other country's currency, we don't believe it's valuable anymore. It doesn't have value. It's based on nothing, right? It's not backed by anything. It's not backed by any single thing. You know, like it used to be backed by gold at one point, but that's no longer the case. So there's nothing here, and this is why they can keep printing money, right? This is why, you know, you hear about countries when they're going into problems, they just print more money. And this is where I say, like, if you're going into stable coins, okay, cool, but you're not doing nothing to solve the issue. You're not. You're just literally turning this issue into a digital one, and that's it. So you're not solving any kind of problem. And so when you're thinking about a country, like, let me just give you a quick example, right? Greece had a problem where their currency just completely collapsed, right? Just imagine at one point, right, you were dealing with Greece and you had to deal with their stablecoin, right? So you're dealing with their stablecoin, and then all of a sudden you hear, oh, Argentina's just completely collapsed. Let's just say you've got millions of dollars in their stablecoin, because we're talking about, you know, big banks and stuff doing these transfers and stuff. And then all of a sudden, the currency just completely collapses, and it could even be that the stablecoin depegs. Are you going to be happy with that? Are you going to be happy in that situation? Would you want to take that kind of risk? Or would you rather just use XRP, where you have your own stablecoin, you transfer it through XRP, and XRP will just transfer it into their currency for you? And this is where I say XRP has that unique special place. And so while I do accept that it does seem like banks are starting to try and use stablecoins instead, I don't think it's the best answer. I don't. I really don't at all. And part of me, when I think about this, right, it makes me think that this might be the reason. Ripple was always, you know, coming up as against the banks, right? That was the whole thing. Like, they were coming to compete with the banks, and that kind of, you know, it was that kind of attitude. I think part of this is that the banks are trying to, you know, that they don't want Ripple in the scene. You know, Ripple is a powerful company. They don't like the fact that they're trying to battle against them. They don't like that they're trying to compete. I think some of this is them trying to kind of get XRP out of the way. And, you know, I'm not a huge conspiracy theory guy, as I've said before, but I actually do think there's a possibility that part of the whole thing of the lawsuit with the SEC was to try and hinder XRP's success. I really do think that's a very real possibility. And at the end of the day, like, we know that there was ETHgate. So we know Ethereum and consensus, we know there was shady stuff going on. So this isn't me just clutching at straws here. This isn't me just pulling things out the air. Like, we know that there was shady things going on behind that lawsuit. 100%. There was 100% shady things going on. So I do think it's not unreasonable to think that XRP could have had a whole different trajectory had some of these things not have occurred, right? Or even if, let's just say, Ripple wasn't like backing it as a company. Let's just say XRP was an asset that was built there and there wasn't Ripple there behind it as well, you know, trying to sell the product. I think that could have been a whole different thing, right? But let's move on. So one of the things that was explained here was the Triffin dilemma. So I want to get into that. So the Triffin dilemma. The Triffin dilemma is the conflict when one crypto tries to be both a scarce global reserve asset, in brackets like gold, and an everyday payment currency, in brackets like the dollar. Notably, to stay scarce and valuable, it needs a low supply and high price, making people hoard it instead of spending it. However, for daily use, it needs stability and cheap transactions, which pushes fees up or forces more issuance, which hurts scarcity. Bitcoin picked, quote, digital gold, so on-chain coffee payments became impossible. Meanwhile, Ethereum tried both and saw gas fee chaos. Also, stablecoins have fixed volatility but added centralization. Essentially, no single chain can perfectly do both without the painful trade-offs. Another investor who responded to Almore agreed, saying that stablecoins don't solve this fundamental problem, instead they only digitize it. Yeah, so exactly what I said before, like all you're doing is like you're making the problem go to digital because you're still using a fiat currency. And while I don't think fiat currencies are going to go away completely, I do think like, you know, they're still going to have their place, but using things like crypto could actually help, right? This is where crypto can come in and play a better part. And so, you know, when we're looking about the Triffin dilemma, there's just one more part I want to show you guys in regards to this. And this is in regards to something that Molly Almore had said. So Molly Almore of Val Hill Capital also argued that claims suggesting that sovereign stablecoins would make XRP obsolete ignore an important economic reality. She questioned how stablecoins could fix the long-standing Triffin dilemma. Almore explained that it's not in the interest of the United States to keep serving as the world's main reserve currency issuer, and China wouldn't want that role either because it would hurt its export industry. So yeah, in regards to the Triffin dilemma, I agree. I will just say this, in regards to the United States not wanting to still be the world's main reserve currency issuer, I kind of question that, to be honest with you, because, you know, whoever's got the global reserve currency, it makes their country the most powerful, right? So that's why the United States is the most powerful country out there, because the global reserve currency at the moment is the US dollar. And, you know, like all countries would like to have their currency as the global reserve currency, right? Like it is a thing where it used to be took in turns. So every so many years it would change. So there was a point where the pound, the GBP, was actually the world reserve currency, and it went to the US, and basically they just never gave it up. So that's basically how it all happened. And so I can't imagine them wanting to give up the US dollar as the world reserve currency. I don't really understand that, because it's what makes their country the most powerful, because every other country then relies on the US dollar, which obviously helps the US. So I couldn't imagine that. In regards to China, I don't know about that with the export industry. I'm not going to say I know that well enough to be able to agree or disagree with that. But the other thing I will say is this, when we come to talking about the global reserve currency, I'm not saying that this is a 100% certainty that it would happen, but the way I see it is the US dollar is being completely debased. And in all honesty, like this is all countries that they just keep printing their money, right? And this is why crypto is, I think it is being looked at as the next revolution, because with these cryptos, you can make them finite, right? Like you can make it so there's a fixed supply. And so when it comes to using crypto, you've not got to worry that they can keep printing the currency, right? You can make it so it has a fixed supply, and that is it. And so I do think there is a possibility that if, let's just say, the US dollar was just losing its strength, which it is, it's being debased, that's just a fact, it could get to a point where if they're saying, well, okay, look, we can't keep the US dollar because, you know, it's basically being debased into oblivion, what they could say is, well, let's use a crypto or a basket of cryptos. Why? Well, in that sense, no country has the global reserve currency anymore. And so rather than it being a thing of the other country then gets it and all the other countries have got to, play with that country's global reserve currency at that point, they can say, well, here we have a neutral currency. It's not something that any country has. And so it's fair, right? It's like no other country is going to have more power than the other because of this. We'll all just use these neutral cryptocurrencies. So I do think that is a possibility. So getting back to the point, for me, when I do look at this with XRP as a bridge asset, I'm not saying that this guarantees that XRP will definitely be heavily utilized, but I still think, like, at the end of the day, just because these banks are using, stable coins and stuff like that, it doesn't mean it's the best option, right? Like, some of this could be out of spite, right? It could just be Ripple are coming in, they've got this XRP. It could make Ripple hugely powerful if XRP was adopted to its maximum potential, and we don't want that. Like as Santiago said, like the thing is with XRP, if you understand it, we know what its actual potential is and it's not living up to its potential. So yes, we understand that it's not being utilized to what it could be utilized, but we know what it can do. And I think that's what the frustrating thing is that like, it's not that we think XRP is this absolutely like, oh, well, for me, as a grounded person, I don't think, XRP is the best thing ever to come out of life, but it is a great cryptocurrency. And if it was utilized to its full potential, it could live up to that potential. It could. Now, that doesn't mean every bank in the world is using it, but it does mean it could have a lot more greater adoption. And it could really be a huge network for payments. It could be the go-to network when it comes to anything payments related. I think that is a huge possibility and reality for XRP. Now, whether it will be that in the end, we will see. But that's the vision that we can see for XRP. And I think that's where some of this frustration comes from, because these banks, like, it's kind of like cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like, yes, okay, if you want to use stablecoins, okay, that's fine. That's your choice, but you're not picking the best option. So, okay, if that's what you want to do, but you're not fixing any of the actual inherent problems that we have here. But maybe they don't want to, right? It's like talking about replacing fiat currency. I think fiat currency is not the best thing. We've seen that over time. It's not been great. We're losing value through it all the time. It keeps getting printed. It's ridiculous. But this is what we're stuck with at this point. This is just how it works, and this is what we're dealing with. So I think we just have to accept and acknowledge that reality, that even if these banks are thinking, well, we want to stick with the fiat model, the fiat currency model, that's their choice. Whether it's good or bad, whether it's the right choice or wrong, that's what they're choosing to do. But for me, I still see XRP having its place. I really do. So I don't think stablecoins will make XRP obsolete. I do think that it does seem like banks are going to go with that too. I do think that is going to be the case. But I don't know, man. Like, I think eventually XRP will still have its role. And who knows, when they start to realize that this whole stablecoin thing is still just the problem of the fiat currencies, maybe then there might be a change over time. Or when Ripple's already solidified its position to a point where they can't be denied anyway, and they understand that Ripple is going to be here to stay, which I think is quite evident with all the acquisitions that they've made, because they've brought huge companies and clearing houses. Like, I just don't see them going anywhere at this point. I think they've solidified their position, and I think maybe over time that's where it will be seen. But I think they might worry about Ripple maybe having a monopoly if XRP was to get too big, because obviously they have the escrow. So I think these are concerns that they might be thinking about, But yeah, overall, that's my thoughts. I still think XRP has its place. So I thought this was good to share with you guys, just to help you understand it on a bit of a deeper level. Thank you very much for watching this. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that bell. Take care.